So all khair and shar comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And nafa and darar are all exclusively in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls nafa, and He controls the asbab of nafa. He controls darar and He controls the asbab of darar. What that means is that while Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created asbab that are beneficial, they are nafi', the extent of nafi', the extent of benefit or good that comes out of them is ultimately in the control of Allah. So if He wants, He can take the asbab of nafa' and bring darar from them, just like He can take the asbab of darar and bring nafa' from them. And the Quran has many examples of this. The stick of Musa alayhi salam turning from something beneficial suddenly into something harmful, and then from something harmful immediately and suddenly into something beneficial. This is an example of that. It's also a tamtheel of that. Ibrahim alayhi salam being thrown into the fire and the fire being a source of comfort for him. This is the asbab of darar being switched off, you can say. So one of the things that I explain in this is that while Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is an-nafi' and He is ad-dar, He has created asbab through which He conveys His nafi' and through which He conveys His darar. Okay? And we as human beings have been given the responsibility to acquire and adopt the asbab of nafa' within certain parameters, and to abstain from the asbab of darar within certain parameters. So first understand the scale of asbab, the scale of nafa' and darar that asbab fall under. This is usually how I explain it, and it's quite self-explanatory when you look at it that way. So let's look at the scale of nafa' first. There are some asbab that are almost certainly beneficial. Okay? They're almost certainly nafi'. I use the word almost because at the end their nafa' is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But somebody who is starving of thirst and on the verge of dying from thirst, if you give him water or you give her water, it's almost certain that the thirst will be quenched and they won't die because of thirst. Just like if somebody is starving of food and you give them food, it's almost certain that they're not going to die of starvation now. Can they still die? Yes, they can die from some other cause. But food at the time of extreme hunger and water at the time of extreme thirst, these are almost certain asbab. And you can, in your mind, you can think of the scale of darar in the exact same way. There are some asbab that are almost certain to have darar. Again, using almost so that we have that, we have room for that disclaimer that ultimately Allah is musabbibul asbab. He can use that sabab for whatever He wants. So, like today I was giving an example. If somebody jumps off a high-rise building, somebody jumps off the Empire State Building, it's almost certain that they're going to die. If they got saved by some miraculous intervention on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's fine. But it's almost certain that they will die. So you have, in the scale of asbab, you have things that are almost certain. Then beneath that, you have those that are highly probable. very probable. Not to the degree of the first one, but quite probable. Then you have those that are likely. You have those that are likely. Then you have those that are uncertain. 50-50. It could be an agent of nafa', but not necessarily. And on the other side, it could be an agent of darar, but not necessarily. Then you come down. Beneath uncertainty is, you can say, it is to mirror what was above. You say it's unlikely. And then underneath unlikely, it's highly improbable. And then at the bottom of it, it's almost certainly not possible. Okay? So you could take all the asbab in the world, and if you were to categorize them into benefit and harm, you could put all of the asbab on this scale. All right? Does that make sense? Okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us into this world of asbab. And as I said, our responsibility is to use the asbab of nafa', of benefit, within certain parameters. What are those parameters? Well, the first parameter is that, is it something that Allah has permitted? Is it something that is allowed for us to acquire? Is it something that is necessary for us to acquire? Is it something that's accessible to us? Because if it's not accessible, then there's no question. There's no need to go forward. Is it required or not? Is it necessary? If it's not necessary, again, the discussion is not necessary either. So within these parameters, we have to work with these asbab. And like this, here we are surrounded with our asbab. You sitting in front of me, you're wearing glasses. Okay, that's a sabab. It has, it's a cause, and it has an obvious effect. And as long as that's working for you, you can use it. It's something of benefit. It's something that there is no apparent harm. So go for it. You're all wearing clothes. You're sitting on carpet. You're sitting in a building with heating and with light and all kinds of amenities and facilities. These are all asbab. And we have been given the directive to use them. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وسخر لكم ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. All of this is at your disposal. Use it. Okay, fine. When it comes to disease is from the asbab of darar. It is from the asbab of harm. So we need to abstain from it within certain parameters, which means we abstain from it to the extent that is possible for us. And one of the ways we do that is by looking after our health. We don't do things that are going to certainly damage us or harm us. We look after our health. We don't expose ourselves to elements, situations, circumstances unnecessarily where our health is put at risk. And if there is the opposite of health, the opposite of the asbab of health, which are the asbab of sickness, then we do our best to avoid the asbab of sickness. This is what Rasulullah ﷺ has taught us. He avoided the asbab of sickness and he adopted the asbab of health. This is the case in his food and drink. This is his case in the treatment of illnesses. And this was his general lifestyle without going to extremes. He ﷺ has used substances to treat himself, food substances and different types of medications that were used at that time, or non-medicinal treatments, interventions, something like bloodletting, and so on and so forth. Different types of treatments were used by our Prophet ﷺ. Now, before we talk about the nature of disease, before we talk about, in fact, let's talk about the nature of disease first. And specifically the nature of disease spreading. What is our belief regarding this? So, is disease inherently contagious or not? Does disease inherently have the power, have the ability to spread, or does it not? So, the hadith of Rasulullah is telling us, La adwa. La adwa. There is no such thing as contagion. So, in one riwayah of this hadith, a Bedouin asked the Prophet ﷺ that, if when one of my camels gets an irritation or inflammation of his skin, then I find that all of them end up getting it. Yet here you are saying that disease is not spread. So the Prophet ﷺ asked him, فَمَنْ أَعْدَ الْأَوَّلِ? Who gave the first camel that sickness? Your camels were all together. One of them got it. So how did the first one get it? So on one side you have this hadith. Okay? On the other side you have the hadith that says, فِرُّوا مِنَ الْمَجْذُومِ فِرَارَكَ أو فِرَّ مِنَ الْمَجْذُومِ فِرَارَكَ مِنَ الْأَسَدِ. فِرُّوا مِنَ الْمَجْذُومِ بصيغة الجمع فِرَارَكُمْ مِنَ الْأَسَدِ. And in the other hadith, لا يرد ممرض على مصح ولا مصح على ممرض. So these ahadith are in fact saying that don't interact with sick people, don't expose yourself to sick people. And on the other side, that hadith is saying that there's no contagion. So what is the tatbiq between these? So there are several ways of doing tatbiq. First of all, remember that Islam is not in denial of realities. In fact, Islam embraces realities. As Muslims, we're never in denial of realities. We always embrace realities. In fact, Islam, one of the things that Islam teaches us to do is to embrace realities. So a reality here is that coming into contact with sickness or elements of sickness can very likely result in contracting that sickness. Okay? That is a reality. It's a plain observation to everyone. You notice in your family, one person gets a flu, everyone has a flu. So that's an observation. But what's behind it? Our belief is that just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the first person sick, Allah is the one who made each subsequent person sick. Now, being exposed to the sick person is from the asbab of sickness. It is from the asbab of sickness. But the sickness itself cannot inherently harm someone or affect someone unless Allah gives permission to it first. So we talked about we live in a world of asbab. So our responsibility is to work with these asbab, understand them, deal with them within certain parameters. We don't let the asbab rule us, but we respect the asbab because Allah has created them. You respect gravity. That's why you don't go, walking off a balcony that's 30 stories high, because this gravity is going to pull you right down. and you respect the force of inertia that your fall is going to create and what that is going to do to your body. Respect the asbab. Use them, but don't let them rule you. So, one of the beliefs that people held and people hold is that disease is inherently contagious. And there is no power to stop this. And there is nothing that can change that. Islam says, no, wait a minute. فَمَنْ أَعْدَ الْأَوَّلِ How did the first person get it? He must have gotten it from somewhere. So we look at not just the asbab, but we look towards musabbibul asbab, the one who creates the asbab of nafa and the asbab of darar. So we will say, in response to فَمَنْ أَعْدَ الْأَوَّلِ, we will say, Allah Azza wa Jal created the asbab of this sickness in the first place. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the asbab of it spreading to others. And it will affect those who were written to be affected. And it will not affect those who were written to be saved. Having said that, are we going to unnecessarily expose ourselves? Our Prophet ﷺ prohibited us from this. He said, don't. So in one of the hadiths that I read, that flee from a leper like you would flee from a lion. Now there are various tawjihat of this. Like Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah says that the tawjih of this hadith is that stay away from him, so that if you get inflicted with that disease by the taqdeer of Allah, you don't start blaming that person or blaming the disease or thinking that the disease had the power to do this to you. So to protect your own faith, to preserve your own faith. This is one of the tawjihat that the ulama have, that muhaddithin have given for this hadith. But another simple tawjih could be that, look, in the realm of asbab, yes, it may spread and it may affect you. Yes, it will only affect you if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. But it could be that Allah wants you to be affected. What does He want you to do in those cases? Abstain from it. Avoid the asbab of harm. Don't rush towards the asbab of harm. Similar to the hadith of the one who is mumrid should not be brought to or should not come to those who is healthy. And the one who is healthy should not be integrated into those who are sick. So Islam is embracing realities. It's not running away from them. It's being practical. Can someone get sick without the permission of Allah? No, they can't. But does it happen that certain diseases, coming into contact with diseases, results in a person contracting the disease? Yes, this is also a reality. You following me so far? So this was the discussion, you can say a core discussion around our beliefs about sickness and contagion, the spreading of disease. Then the next important discussion is about treatment of disease. So we've already discussed that treating disease is the way of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. In one hadith, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Tadawu ya ibadallah, fa inna Allah lam yunzil da'an illa anzala lahu dawa'an, illa da'an wahidan. قالوا وما هو يا رسول الله؟ قال الهرم." Treat yourselves. Use dawa. Treat yourselves, O slaves of Allah, because for every disease that Allah has revealed or Allah has sent down, He has also sent down a cure. And there are numerous ahadith to this effect. Alright. So, first question is, to what extent are we allowed or are we expected to treat ourselves? Well, the simple answer is, we are expected to treat ourselves to A, within the ethical limits of our deen, and B, within what is in our capacity. So if, just as an example, if our cure, our treatment, let's say, involved hurting other human beings or harming other human beings, then no, we would not go and get that treatment, because that is outside the ethical limits and boundaries of our deen. Similarly, if there was something that was permissible, but it's not accessible to the sick person, maybe it's not available in their country, maybe it's not affordable to them, it's beyond their budget, are they still responsible for getting that treatment? No, they're not. You're only responsible to the extent that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you the means. Now let's say there is a treatment that is accessible, available, affordable, however you want to frame it. Then when you go to use that treatment, you find out that it has some haram element in it. Maybe not from an ethics perspective, in terms of dealing with people or hurting people, not from that aspect of morality, from the humanitarian side of morality, but more from the standpoint of our guidelines for consumption. If the substances that are used in that treatment are not compliant with the guidelines of our deen, then what do you do? And this happens all the time. There's so many medications that have haram substances, not necessarily for medicinal purposes, but they are the non-medicinal ingredients in the medications that are also the non-halal ones. Simple example, the gelatin in capsules. The substance of the capsule is okay, it's acceptable, but it's encapsulated in a substance that's haram. Now some people might say, well, yeah, just tear it open and take it. Well, that might be possible for certain supplements and some medications. It might be possible with your fish oils, for example, or your vitamin E's, where you pierce the capsule or the gel cap and you swallow what's inside it, you drink what's inside it. For those who can stomach that type of thing. But there are much harsher and much more severe medications that are encapsulated in that gelatin for more reasons than just taste. They are so harsh that if you were to try to swallow them, it could actually damage your esophagus. Or they're so strong that they could cause an immediate vomiting reaction. They could cause severe indigestion. So where do you go from there? So the first question that we ask if we reach such a point is there an alternative to this? If there is an alternative, then we may use it. We should use it. And that alternative could be in many different ways. It could be the same medication that's also available in different form. Maybe they've created a suspension form for it, where it's a liquid, you can drink it, and they've made it such it has been formulated to be drunk. Whereas if you were to pierce the capsule and try to drink it, it would be harmful for you. This is okay. There could be a tablet form of it where there is no capsule. There could be an injection form of it. There could be an intravenous form of it. Or there could be another product on the market that does the same thing, and it's just not in that form. It doesn't have those ingredients. So we need to ask ourselves, is there an alternative? Okay. Let's say there isn't an alternative. If the sickness is such that it is seriously impacting a person's health, it's not like your common cold or something like that, but it's something that actually impacts a person's physical well-being, it impacts their health, then yes, there is room to take it. Of course, within those boundaries, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. That it is not for the sake of fulfilling a desire to consume it, nor is it taken more than is necessary. It is taken only to the extent that is necessary. Then what will happen? The substance will not become halal for the person. In the case of gelatin, the gelatin doesn't become halal for the person, but the sin is removed. The sin of consuming it is removed. فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. That's what the Quran says. So the haram substance never actually becomes halal for a person. But the element of sin, which is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He removes it, He waives it. As long as it's within those boundaries. But if someone is misusing that, then the element of sin comes back. Are we clear so far? Yes? Let's talk about another aspect related to sicknesses, especially those that impact others and that spread. Traveling and movements. So I'll narrate very briefly a story, which is an incident that's mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari and other books of hadith as well, in the Muwatta Imam Malik and other books. In the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, after the conquests of Sham, a plague broke out called the Ta'un of Amwas. Amwas was a town from where this plague started. And from there it spread across Jordan and affected a large part of what is Syria today. Umar radiallahu anhu had to visit that area to sort out the affairs of his administration. So when he went there on his way to Damascus, he reached a place called Sadaqa. And there, Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah radiallahu anhu, who was the commander, who was the chief commander of the armies of the Muslims in Sham, Abu Talha radiallahu anhu, and other prominent Sahaba radiallahu anhum came to meet him. There they informed him that a plague had broken out, and they suggested and requested him to go back. They said, please do not proceed any further. There's a serious plague here, people are dying, and you have some of the cream of the companions of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam with you. It's not, we don't think it's appropriate for you to endanger yourselves in this way, so please go back. Umar radiallahu anhu said, no, I came for an important work. I didn't just come here. I can't go back without consultation. So he consulted with the Muhajirin, he consulted with the Ansar, he consulted with the old Sahaba, those who had accepted Islam in the early days in Mecca. He consulted with all of them, and they all felt that he should go back. Just as he was deliberating and thinking, Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu showed up. And he was, at that moment, he was away, he was busy for something. He came and he found this discussion taking place, and he saw Umar radiallahu anhu trying to make a decision. So he said, I have some knowledge about this from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that is that I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying that if you hear of an epidemic that has broken out in a certain land, then those who are not there should not go there, and those who are there should not leave from there. So then Umar radiallahu anhu was grateful that the decision that he was thinking was in line with this teaching of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that he now heard directly. And this is also Hafiz ibn Hajar Rahmatullahi comments that this should be added to the muwafaqat of Umar radiallahu anhu, where his thoughts were in line with the teachings of Allah and His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Khair, this hadith is narrated from numerous Sahaba, from Usama, from Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu, through Usama ibn Zayd radiallahu anhu, from Aisha radiallahu anha, from a whole group of Sahaba radiallahu anhum. In fact, even Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu narrates something to this effect. Khair. So Umar radiallahu anhu then returned. He came back. And that hadith of Bukhari that لا يريد أو لا يورد ممرض على مصح ولا مصح على ممرض, healthy person should not be brought into sick people, and vice versa. So this is telling us that the movements of people should be made with a great deal of caution. You don't want sick people traveling into the area of healthy people and then the disease spreading there, and nor do you want vice versa to happen. The verses in Surah Al-Baqarah, that story in Surah Al-Baqarah, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ خَرَجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ وَهُمْ أُلُوفٌ حَذَرَ الْمَوْتِ فَقَالَ لَهُمُ اللَّهُ مُوتُوا ثُمَّ أَحْيَاهُمْ. This is referring to people from Bani Israel who were trying to flee a plague. They're trying to run away. And the hadith of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gives such a wa'id for someone who is trying to al-farru min al-ta'un kal-farri min al-zahf. It's like somebody who's running away from a battle. And these people were trying to flee a plague that had broken out, as many mufassirin have mentioned and agreed upon, that there were thousands of them and they were trying to flee this plague. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had all of them die. Possibly as a punishment, possibly to show them that you cannot escape death, like the Quran says, قُلْ لَنْ يَنْفَعُكُمُ الْفِرَارُ إِنْ فَرَرْتُمْ. Running away is not going to help you. It's not going to save your life. You're going to die. أَيْنَمَا تَكُونُوا يُدْرِككُمُ الْمَوْتِ وَلَوْ كُنْتُمْ فِي بُرُوجٍ مُشَيَّدَةٍ. I'm going to reference this again, just shortly. So, trying to escape the area of the plague once it has broken out, this appears to be unacceptable in light of this ayah. And the hadith is also underscoring the same concept. Similarly, going to a place where the disease has broken out is also prohibited. What some of the fuqaha of the Shafi'iyya have said is that the nahi of khuruj min ard al-ta'un or min ard al-waba, this nahi is for tahreem, and the nahi of dukhul is for tanzih. Now, question arises. What if somebody wants to leave not for the sake of fleeing, but maybe for the sake of getting healthy and getting better? Not for the sake of fleeing from the taqdeer of Allah, but for the sake of getting better. Maybe there's a treatment available somewhere. So what should happen with those people? Now, ulama kiram have given two examples to reference this situation. One example is from that same incident of Amwas, where Umar radiallahu anhu, after reaching Medina, wrote a letter to Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah radiallahu anhu. He knew that Abu Ubaidah is not going to listen to him if he gives him a direct instruction or he tells him that, I'm sympathizing with you. He says, I need you for something. So as soon as you get my letter, leave what you're doing and come to me. So Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu understood that Umar radiallahu anhu is actually trying to evacuate me from this area. He sees me as a huge asset for the Muslims. He does not want me to be harmed. He's actually trying to evacuate me, but he's using the pretense of I have some work for you to do. So he responded in a very polite way, saying that, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, thank you so much. I would rush to your command, but the thing is, I have my armies here and they need me right now, and it's very difficult for me to leave. There are too many things happening at this point. So please excuse me. Otherwise, I would definitely leave whatever I'm doing and rush to you. So Umar radiallahu anhu, when he received this letter, he understood that Abu Ubaidah has understood what Umar radiallahu anhu wants. So he then instructed him to move the people from where they were to another area, to Al-Jabiyah. And he said, look, this land, this place is not suitable for you. You've gone there and you've gotten sick. Move the people to a healthier area where the air and the water and the food is more suitable to you. So Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu was just about to start this process. He was about to get on his horse. He placed his foot in the stirrups of his horse, and he felt the ta'un. It had affected him. It had afflicted his foot. And he stopped right there. Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu is buried there in Jordan. And he passed away as a result of that ta'un. Just like Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu, who is buried right next to, very close to Amman, he also passed away in the same outbreak. Many Sahaba passed away in that plague. Thousands of Sahaba, it's mentioned, passed away in that ta'un of Amwas. Khair. So that was one reference of movement. That the fact that Umar radiallahu anhu wanted Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu to come out of there. It's interesting because he would not be going against the command of the Quran. And then for him to ask Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu to shift the Muslims to another area, knowing that the plague has inflicted them, he also would not be acting in contradiction with the Quran. Let's go now to a marfu' hadith, very famous hadith that I'm sure you've come across, the hadith of the Uraniyin. You're all familiar with it? Yes? No? The people of Banu Urayna came to Medina and became sick. They became extremely sick. Their skin turned yellowish and pale. Their bellies became bloated and inflated, and they got very sick there. The Prophet ﷺ had them go outside Medina to an area where the camels of Sadaqa were kept. And he told them to stay there, live there, and drink from the urine and the milk of those camels. This was going to be their treatment. Now, some muhaddithin have referenced this hadith to say that, look, they all got sick, and the Prophet ﷺ had them leave Medina, which is where they got sick, and to go to another place. And that movement was for the sake of tadawi. That movement was for the sake of treatment and ilaj. Therefore, if there is an epidemic outbreak somewhere and someone is moving for the sake of treatment, then it is permissible. But there is one issue that I would respectfully submit to that istidlal, and that is there was no waba in Medina that had spread, that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam shifted them out to make them avoid. This was them coming to a land, coming to an area, and getting sick. There was no outbreak that they were trying to be saved from or evacuated from or sent away for treatment. So the qiyas is not complete, in my humble and um, probably very ill-informed opinion. It's not adding up as a qiyas. All that it proves is that, yes, if you go to a place and it's not suiting you, go somewhere else and get treated. And of course, the masail related to the tadawi bil muharram, those are also related to that issue, but not this. Yes, the story of Umar radiallahu anhu is very interesting, where he had him shift. So there, what muhaddithin have mentioned is that it was purely for treatment, it was purely for tadawi, not to make them escape. Now here's something interesting that happened at that same ta'un. Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu announced to people that, look, this plague has broken out. Everyone run for your lives. Flee into the mountains and into the jungles and get away from this place. When Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu heard this, in fact, first Shurahbil ibn Hasana radiallahu anhu heard this, he got very angry. He says, no, Amr ibn al-As wasn't an ordinary person. Amr ibn al-As was the conqueror of Egypt. He was the governor of Egypt for Umar radiallahu anhu. He was not, someone insignificant. He was a very powerful and influential person. He gave this directive. But Shurahbil ibn Hasan radiallahu anhu, when he heard that Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu is saying this, he came running and he says, what's Amr saying? He said, I accepted Islam. وَعَمْرٌ أَضَلُّ مِنْ بَعِيرِ أَهْلِهِ. At that time, Amr was more lost than the camel of his people. He doesn't know what he's talking. He came much later. And it's true, Amr ibn al-As accepted Islam even after his son, Abdullah ibn Amr. He says, what does Amr know? Then he narrated what he heard Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying in this regards. That Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for this ta'un, and he said, those of my ummah who die from it will be shaheed, and it will be a rahmah for the believers. It will not be a punishment for them. It will be a punishment for the disbelievers. So don't you dare listen to him. Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, he also chimed in, and he said, in fact, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for this ummah. He made different types of du'as. One of them was that they are not destroyed by some kind of a punishment from the heavens or from the earth. That dua was accepted. Then he made dua that they should not be driven against each other. They should not fight against each other. That dua was not accepted. So then, in some ahadith, which Hafiz ibn Hajar Hamdulillah has authenticated, he said they are thoroughly authenticated. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, then in that case, then let them die by ta'an or ta'un. Ta'an or ta'un. Ta'an meaning at the, by the tip of the spears of the enemy, or by diseases like the ta'un. In both cases, they will go straight to Jannah. Okay? So he says, this is dua Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam made. And he said, this is going to be a rahmah for you. And in fact, then Mu'adh radiallahu anhu made a dua that no one would think of making. He said, oh Allah, if you know that I have heard this from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then give me and my family, give Mu'adh and Alu Mu'adh a share in this. And immediately he got this ta'un. It appeared in his finger. It appeared on the tip of his shahada finger. And then he said, he used to look at it and say that I would not take anything in exchange for this. I would not take humurun na'am in exchange for this ta'un, because I know the reward that it's going to bring. So anyways, what is the ruling about movements in this? It looks like the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the majority of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum stuck to this ruling that if you are in a place and has broken out, you should not leave from there. especially to flee from it. If there is movement for the sake of treatment, and that it's not contradicting the other hadiths of mumrid ala musih and musih ala mumrid, then it appears to be acceptable and it appears to be correct. But generally speaking, travel and movements need to be controlled, because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has given this directive that if somebody is inflicted with disease, then stay away from them. Okay? I know our time is up, but you guys joined late, so I can penalize you a little bit without feeling guilty about it. The issue of ibadat, especially those that are offered in congregation. Right now, like today, I received so many calls from different cities in North America related to Jum'ah. What should we do about Jum'ah? Should we have it? Should we not have it? And it's different in every state, in every country. Canada's situation is different. In the States, it's much more state-centered, state-centric. I don't know if your officials have they announced anything to this effect about congregations and about Jum'ah and stuff like that. So it's pretty quiet. You guys are going to go ahead and do your Jum'ah, it seems. Yes?
Some places, there's not going to be any Jum'ah, some places.
Okay. So like in California, a large portion of California, especially Southern California, they're not having any Jum'ah. They just announced it and they said, go and pray Dhuhr. So what should people do in this case? There's two things here. One is to keep your eyes and ears open to what the regulatory bodies or the government officials are saying. What are they saying? What are their requirements? So we should fulfill their requirements. But if they're not requiring something, then don't go out of your way to do it if it's going to compromise your dini obligations. So let me give you an example. In the case of Canada, they have brought a restriction on congregations over 250 people. Any congregation, any gathering that has more than 250 participants is not allowed. Okay? It started out as a piece of advice or a warning, and now it's being implemented as a ban on larger gatherings, on any gathering that is larger than that, period, in some provinces. Okay. So what should the people of the masajid do? Respect it. Break up it doesn't mean cancel Jummah. It doesn't mean tell everyone to go home and pray Dhuhr, because you do not have that authority to tell people that, no, now you just pray Dhuhr. No. Because the conditions of Jummah apply to everyone. And the majority of the public, 99.99% of the public is healthy. The conditions of Jummah apply to them. Yes, there are precautionary measures being taken. That does not give people, this is the problem with these half-baked, Maulvis and half-baked imams or shayukh or whatever they are. They don't look at issues with enough depth. Right away, it's this, and if not, then give the biggest relaxation that you possibly can and walk away. It doesn't work like that. You have to answer to Allah on the Day of Judgment. If Jummah was wajib on all these people, then are you going to stand in front of Allah and pay for it? No one can. So the first thing is, look at what the regulatory bodies and what exactly the government officials are saying. If they're saying don't have huge congregations, then don't have huge congregations. Have smaller congregations. So in the case of Canada, like the masjids that consulted me today, some of them were acting very brave. Like, no, we don't care. Yeah, the government is saying that. We told them, yeah, we'll comply. We added another Jummah, but we don't care. I said, oh yeah? You don't care? One case of coronavirus reported from your congregants, and you will start caring really, really fast. Because all of the liability of that is going to fall on your head. They're going to come and close your masjid down. Because you refuse to comply to a simple instruction. Then their tone changed right away. They didn't sound so brave after that. They're like, yeah, you have a point. I said, yeah. Why do you want to act defiantly to something that's actually there for everyone's protection? So I said, you make sure that you don't just add another Jum'ah, but you tell people to come to that Jum'ah. It's not just a token thing that you're doing to make people happy. There's some masjids in Vancouver area that said the same thing, talking very brave, acting very brave. You know what? One case of coronavirus from your congregants, and you know what? It's going to be over for you and for your organization. You're going to make life very difficult for yourself going forward after this crisis. So respect the laws, but don't go overboard like some of these people are doing, where they're just stopping Jummah altogether. There's no need to do that. If you can have it in the masajid, have it in the masajid, have it to the extent that's being allowed. Let's say a time comes when they're saying we're stopping all congregations. All schools must be closed. All public places of congregation, of gatherings must be closed. Churches and mosques and synagogues must be closed. Let's say a time comes when that happens. So then what do? Then do you say, okay, no more Jum'ah? No. Then you say, offer Jum'ah in small groups, in 3s and 4s if you have to. In small groups of 5 or 6 people. 5 or 6 people can get together at a house. There is no legal ban against that. Do it with people that you know are healthy, they haven't been diagnosed, or they're not expressing or displaying symptoms of the virus. Get together with 5, 6 people and do Jum'ah and keep it very simple. Jummah is easy. You can find, simple Jummah in there's so many books that have the khutbah, and the conditions for Jummah and its khutbah are very, very simple. You do hamd, thana, salawat on Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, read an ayat or two, or read a hadith, read a couple of words of, a reminder of taqwa, sit down, then stand up, and then again do some hamd and thana, read salawat on Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and your khutbah is done. You could literally do it in a couple of minutes. Pray your salat, and that's it. And according to most fuqaha, the safe, according to Ahnaf, the safe thing is if you have three congregants, it's enough. So that would be what we default to, not Salat al-Dhuhr. Okay? So keep that in mind, just in case people stop Jum'ah in your area. You don't just stop Jum'ah. You can't just remove an obligation, say it's not an obligation anymore. All right? Going forward, we don't know what's going to happen, but going forward, this might be the same scenario for Taraweeh as well, where just tell people, instead of saying there's no Taraweeh, no. Don't change Ramadan. Just say, okay, fine, do Taraweeh in homes. Make small arrangements. Do it with families. People are asking about Hajj, what to do about Hajj. Well, there's nothing that we can do about Hajj. We are just waiting to listen to what the authorities decide. But there is a high probability. In fact, I should say there's an increasingly high possibility or probability that Hajj might even be cancelled this year. But you know what? That has happened 40 times in the past already. So it wouldn't be like, oh my God, for the first time in 1400 years, Hajj is no. It's already happened 40 times where officially the government that was overseeing Hajj at that time declared there is no Hajj this year. For various reasons of safety, wars and battles and different circumstances that had taken place. It was cancelled. So anyways, these were some masail and some mabahith. I thought I should bring it to your attention, and I hope you will find it beneficial. If there's something you want to ask, you can ask me quickly. Otherwise, we will close this session. Barakallahu feekum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us and our families and our communities safe. May Allah Azza wa Jal enable us and the whole world to get through this issue, and bring health and bring afiyah quickly to us and to all our brothers and sisters and to all the people around the world. You do have a question?
Yeah, so ta'un is not just a specific disease, right? It could be any disease which is prevalent, which is like outbroken.
Ta'un, some ulama have written that it is a specific disease, which is referred to as the plague. However, the ahkam related to ta'un would apply to anything that has that type of nature, that epidemic nature.